Welcome to Drafting Compliance. I'm Kayne, he's Tom, and in this season's series of episodes, we're going to be talking about regulatory compliance. Specifically, we're going to be talking about FedRAMP, but we're also going to be talking about beer. Tom, how did we get involved in this?
Yeah, it's kind of a fun story. So I'm a craft beer guy. My boss, Peter, knew that I was a craft beer guy, and he said, hey, if you guys are going to do this video series, help us build community, let's do something fun too. And he suggested, why not bring craft beer into it? And I, of course, jumped at that idea. I'm a big craft beer fan. But Kayne, as I understand it, you are not a particularly big craft beer fan.
I am not. My friends, my boyfriend, everybody is wondering how I've gotten talked into this. But I am willing to learn new things. And myself, I am a red wine drinker. I am a Scotch drinker. So at least I know how to taste something. I'm looking forward to learning a lot from you, Tom.
Well, I can tell you, my wife, when I told her I was doing this, she said, that sounds great, but she's really a little bit floored by the idea that I somehow managed to get beer built into a work project. So she wants to understand how that happened, and I don't think I can convince her that it wasn't my handiwork. So.
Well, I think you and I have both dealt with regulatory matters before, and certainly a drink at the end of the day is not out of hand. And having, you've got FedRAMP experience, I've got FedRAMP experience. I think it probably won't be too bad to look forward to something. But why are we doing FedRAMP, Tom?
Well, how about this? Before we get to that, let's crack our beers so we give it a little bit of time to breathe.
Yeah, it's not like I'm putting this off. Can the camera see this? So this is what that's apparently beer.
I chose Anchor Steam, and I chose it for a good reason, because if we're going to go on a craft beer journey, I thought we should start with what is widely considered the very first craft beer in America. So this is out of Anchor Brewing in San Francisco, first brewed in 1896. And I will apologize in advance, Kayne, because this isn't going to be your favorite beer. I already know that. As somebody who doesn't drink beer, this is probably going to come across a little harsh. Okay,
thanks for the warning. That does not look like a glass of red wine, Tom. I have seen red wine. This is also not. Now you've got a different glass than me too.
Yeah, the type of glass you use really does change the flavor profile. A glass like this, it's got a bit of a fluted top. It helps open up the beer, right?
Okay, so that kind of looks like a Scotch tasting glass, although kind of a rather larger one than a Glencairn.
Yeah. So when you're looking at a beer, or when you're tasting the beer, first thing you want to do is kind of look at the the picture that it gives you, right? So
looks like beer.
You notice the color. What do you notice in the color of that, Kayne?
Kind of brownish, goldenish, sort of amber. Let's go with amber. That scene in Jurassic Park where they've got like the ant in there? I think this is pretty much that scene.
And if you pour it the way a beer should be poured, you'll get a head on it, which is a good thing in a good beer.
Clearly amateur hour over here.
Yeah, this has a nice head on it. And then we give it a nose, so we smell it.
Okay, that's beer.
Do you smell
honey?
Anything?
Maybe.
I smell bananas.
Honey?
Do you smell honey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a good friend of mine will probably tell me it smells like violet, because on many wine tasting tours, I've never been able to identify violet. Yeah,
there is some spice notes in there too, but okay, we won't get too deep into the tasting or into the smelling. We will start to taste it though. So do me a favor, when you taste it, tell me what the mouthfeel is, and then your first impressions on the front end and the back end. I can tell you like it. So I'll tell you that this does coat the mouth a little.
It's
so
quite.
You can feel it on your tongue.
I'd say it's actually quite thin in terms of mouthfeel. Like I only have like red wines to compare this, or Scotch. This is very thin, very grassy. It's like if I were to go out and like mow the garden, right, and like get all the clippings and eat them, I'm fairly certain I'd get this flavor profile. It's very grassy.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bitter on the tongue. It does invite you back for a second drink, in my opinion. So it's not something that leaves you satisfied after the first drink.
Oh, it gets better?
Well, for me it does. For you, maybe not.
All right, so
Anyway, so
let's get on to the FedRAMP bit here.
yeah,
I will continue
that's Anchor Steam.
contemplating this Anchor Steam. We are not affiliated. Maybe we'll look for a sponsorship at some point if we find anything
Yeah,
that
well,
I like.
we do have a beer of the month club membership going
that's
forward.
right.
They'll be delivering us. A selection of curated beers for us to try.
My parcel delivery man is going to be wondering what's going on at my house because I already have a wine club that I'm a member of, and they deliver wine quarterly. So
yeah, this guy's a little boozy. All right, so let's talk FedRAMP.
So why are we doing FedRAMP, Tom? I mean, I know that FedRAMP, well, first of all, there's multiple levels of FedRAMP. So I suppose we should probably talk about the difference between FedRAMP limited SaaS versus low versus medium versus high.
Sure. That's a great question. So, certainly when we look at the business requirements that we have, that drives where we want to be from a FedRAMP perspective. So we certainly had a choice to go low or LI if we wanted to. We chose moderate. We chose moderate for very good business reasons. Our kind of target customers, while not the federal government, they are other commercial entities doing business with the federal government. So those folks are driving to be FedRAMP. So we need to be FedRAMP to meet them where they're at, right? So that's why we chose it. In terms of sort of the lift between LI and moderate and high, there's a very good reason we don't go all the way to high, and there's a very good reason we didn't do LI or low. The moderate stance is 325 controls. It's 17 different families of controls.
Yeah, it's kind of like NIST 853 with some tweaks, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's essentially repackaged NIST 53 with sort of the cloud variables put in. So it's anybody who's familiar with NIST 853 is going to be very comfortable in this framework. We wanted to make sure that we treated our data as CUI. So moderate takes into account the use of CUI data.
Now, Tom, you just used a term there. So for people who aren't familiar with it, CUI is controlled unclassified information. You also might hear it called CUI. And I think some of our viewers might already be thinking, wait, this is CUI. So are they also doing CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, right? Because that also specifically is for CUI, but that's limited to the Department of Defense, right, Tom?
Correct. We don't have that kind of driver. We're not trying to do business directly with the DoD. Certainly that might come in our future at some point, and we can lift the program at that point if we need to. But right now we don't. So CMMC is just not in sort of the business requirements for us. But there are some agencies, or I should say some companies that are doing work with agencies that may require CMMC.
Right. And that's kind of one of those things we're going to wait till like summer to figure out to see how that one really shakes out. Whereas FedRAMP is an established program.
Yep.
That's the right term, right? FedRAMP is a program, right, Tom?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
I want to make sure we're using the right terms for folks who are less familiar with this. So overall then, let's talk through the actual roadmap, the journey to get to FedRAMP moderate. My understanding is, now this is just having done executive advisory, like classic gap analysis, figure out what the gaps are, go plug the gaps, probably get a consultancy or an agency sponsor, somebody who can actually do an assessment of our capabilities. They'll eventually give us an ATO, and we might end up picking up some POAMs there on the back end. And just quick terms before, Tom, you go into detail there. An ATO is an authorization to operate, and a POAM is a plan of action and milestone. But Tom, at a high level, is that kind of the journey we're looking at here?
Yeah, that's right. I think of it just a little bit different. I think of it as we get ready. So this should, in most organizations, represent the largest time chunk in this project. The readiness piece means you understand the control set that needs to be implemented. You've done, to your words, the gap analysis. You know what that gap analysis leaves you wanting. You fill those gaps. At the end of your readiness,
wanting kind of that beer, actually. That leaves me wanting, like a breath mint.
So after you get through that, sort of in the 4 to 5 month time frame for us, we're going to be at the stage where we start to talk with 3PAOs, third-party assessment organizations. That 3PAO is going to help us get to the next step. So they'll produce what's called a readiness assessment report. You'll see it abbreviated as RAR.
Mm-hmm.
So they help us produce that. In doing so, they may give us some mitigation steps that we need to go through, which is part of the process. And if we don't do that, I think I would question the 3PAO that we go through.
Right.
So we expect that. It's a good give and take process.
Mm-hmm.
The 3PAO also helps us interface directly with the sponsoring agency. The sponsoring agency is going to require a document called an SSP. So all of the work
system
that we do,
security plan there for us, and for viewers again who might not have dealt with an SSP, this is not a 10-page document. This is I think the shortest one I've seen is 400-ish pages. That kind of mirror your experience, Tom?
Yeah, it's a novel for sure, and it's not written in a way that normal English users is going to appreciate. So you have to go through and kind of work through some challenges in terms of just interpretation. That's where our platform Hyperproof really helps, because it creates a very clear delineation of here's a requirement, here's a control that fits that requirement, so you can work directly to the need. And then our platform also produces the section 13 of the SSP, which is the bulk of the SSP document in terms of controls. So we're going to go through that process. The 3PAO will actually uplift the SSP directly to our sponsor, and then we'll work with the sponsor to get our ATO, our authorization to operate. Going through that whole process, boom, 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 we will have several different designations with FedRAMP that are useful in communicating with our customers. So,
and those will all get listed in the marketplace, right?
Yep. As we submit our RAR, we will get a readiness assessment. So we will be marked as FedRAMP ready. When we are working with the ATO and we have uplift the SSP before they give us the ATO, we'll be in process. So we'll be FedRAMP in process. And then finally, when we complete, we'll be ATO. So it's nice that FedRAMP recognizes the level of effort you're going through and gives you different designations that you can share with your client base as you go along that journey.
All right. And so it sounds like one of the big artifacts that we'll be producing in the course of this is that system security plan, that SSP. What other big obstacles, not knowing entirely like what you're going to find along here, I think it would be hard to predict like that everything's going to go according to plan. But other than the production of the SSP, what do you see as the big obstacles for us at Hyperproof to actually get to be FedRAMP moderate?
Yeah, this isn't the first framework I've implemented, so I can tell you that always the biggest barrier is time and resources. It's no different here and it's always going to be that way, I think, in any organization. So, it's always thought of as this is a security team effort, but the reality is the security team pushes the requirements and the documentation, but the operational team has to implement and build the procedures around implementation.
And we're going to have all of those examined, right? So not only our policies and our procedures, but that's all going to be examined. There's going to be some interview testing, right, Tom?
There's going to be some significant testing that happens as you go through this process. And at the end of that testing phase, we have to be able to demonstrate repeatable proof as well. So
we can't just have a paper tiger where it all looks really good, but there's actually, and I've also heard that FedRAMP has an attitude, I guess is the best way I could put it, that they presuppose you're going to fail and they don't actually presuppose success. Does that check out with you as well?
Yeah, you are not innocent until proven guilty with FedRAMP. You are guilty until proven innocent. That is absolutely the truth. But honestly, if you look at the history of InfoSec and where the government has been in that space, it makes sense that they treat it that way. And I think it's probably the right approach in information security in general.
Okay. And I guess the only other thing then would be the fact that we're a cloud-based organization. When I've worked with other clients over the years on similar initiatives, the assessment boundary is really a challenge for defining because in an on-premises environment, you can really have just everything in a magical enclave. You put a box around it and everything's in the box is in scope, and everything that's not in the box, well, it's not interesting. I imagine that's going to also be probably a challenge for us, right, Tom?
Yeah, that actually does represent a significant challenge. So as a SaaS company, we are cloud first and we are pretty much cloud only.
Yeah, that's true. It's not like we've got some office.
Yeah, what that really means is we have significant integrations into our platform, and every one of those integrations becomes part and parcel to the assessment. So we have to go through the numerous integrations we have and understand data flow and how it may impact customer data, and decide whether or not it's in boundary or out of boundary, and also determine whether or not we can continue to use that platform or have to build around it, find another partner, whatever it might be. So certainly when you're a cloud native only application, that creates some challenges as well.
Right, and I think we just kind of gave away some of the formula behind the show. So in the next episode of Drafting Compliance, we're actually going to, because Tom right now is working on our assessment boundary, and so in the next episode, we're planning on actually talking about the assessment boundary and looking at how we've managed to put that together, and maybe even an illustration of what it looks like. And I think the only other thing we said we'd talk about was we're both supposed to rate these, right, on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah, that's right. So
okay, so a 1 is something I never want to drink again, and a 10 is something I'm thinking this is beer. What's my scale at the top end? Something I'd consider.
10 would be something
again?
that you I would say on your scale that you are absolutely invited back to drink again. Like
okay,
you
so 10 would be something
10
would be something I'd have in my fridge, and I'd be proud to serve to my friends.
You got it.
Okay, I don't have a good baseline. This is it's not the worst tasting thing I've had. I can think of several scotches I've had that are much worse than this. I'm going to give this a 2.
Oh,
a 2. It's I can think of worse things that I've drank.
Yep. So I will say this: this is not my favorite style of beer, nor is it my favorite beer.
Okay.
I still like it. So this is something I drink around a fire. It reminds me of cozy winter nights, to be honest. So I would drink this again, but I probably wouldn't go out of my way to buy it. So I'm going to give it a 6 on my scale. But yeah, Anchor Steam, a ancient beer in terms of craft beer. Very good.
Fantastic. Well, with that, Tom, I think we'll shut down. Thanks everybody for watching, and we should have another one of these episodes out in a couple weeks. So until then, enjoy the journey to FedRAMP, maybe or maybe not. Try the beer. Remember, we are not actually sponsored, affiliated, or otherwise involved. This is just one we're tasting this week, and I guess in a couple weeks we'll try something different. So with that,
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm gonna learn a lot on this.
And come back and learn about our authorization boundary, Travis.
Fantastic.